Hi, I'm Nate Savage, and welcome to video 4 of the Rhythm Guitar Quick Start series. In this lesson, we're going to tackle one of the more intimidating subjects for newer guitar players, and that's bar chords. Now, I've switched over to my acoustic guitar, and if you've never seen a bar chord before, let me just play one for you real quick. Here is an F bar chord. Now, that can be difficult at first because it requires a lot of strength in your index finger to make good sounding bar chords, but don't worry, I'm going to show you how to develop that strength in your finger and how to make the rest of that shape sound good as well. Bar chords are great because they're distinctly different sounding from open chords, but they have the same advantage as your power chords. You can move them all around the fretboard. To start, let's focus on building some strength and dexterity in your index finger to make your bars for your bar chords. This is a step that a lot of guitar players kind of skip over, and that can be a source of frustration if your index finger isn't really strong. It just takes some time to develop this, and your finger may get fatigued at first, but just know that that's normal. It's going to take some time to build up the strength and dexterity that you need to make these bar chords. The first thing we need to do is just get our index finger on across all 6 strings to make your bar, right? But the farther you go back to the nut of the guitar, the harder it is to make that bar. So what we're going to do is just come to the 3rd fret and put your index finger across all 6 strings to make a bar. And there's 3 things as far as bar placement that I want to go over with you that'll help you make your bar chords sound clean. First of all, when you come make a bar, you don't want to come down just directly on the bottom part of your finger, the fleshy part right here. That can make it a little bit harder to make your bar chords sound clean. What you want to do is kind of tilt your finger back a little bit to where you're more on the bony edge of your finger right here. That makes it a little bit easier to get a good sounding bar. The second aspect of finger placement or bar placement is how close you are to the fret. If you're back here in the middle of the fret or toward the back, right here, it's going to be really buzzy sounding. The closer you are to the fret, right up on it, the easier it's going to be to get a good sounding bar. And the third aspect of bar placement is going to be really specific to your own unique body. So our fingers all have creases in them, and they're all in different spots for all of us. So what you're going to have to do is kind of play around with your bar and find the best place this way to put your bar. Because sometimes if your creases fall on a string, it can be hard to get that string all the way down to where your bar is really clean sounding. So that's something you're going to have to play with and experiment for on your own. So now that we've got those 3 placement topics out of the way, what we want to do now is talk about bar technique a little bit. So what you want to do is basically form a clamp with your thumb and your index finger. If your thumb is in front or behind your finger a little bit, it's going to be a little bit harder to get the strength you need to make a good sounding bar. So basically, you're just making a clamp between your thumb and your index finger like that. That's the first thing you want to remember. The next thing you're going to want to be aware of as far as technique for your bar is if your wrist is kinked too far one way or too far the other. If your wrist is kinked upward like this, it's going to be almost impossible to get your bar in a good spot for clean bar chords. That's going to be really difficult on you. But if your wrist is kinked too far the other way, you're going to get sore after a while and it's going to hurt. So what you want to do is kind of start off with a neutral position. And my wrist ends up being a little bit curved this way, but not too far. So you want to keep that in mind. And one thing that can help you with that is my next point. If your elbow is up here, that's going to be a lot harder for you to make clean bars too, because I'm not getting a very good attack or angle on the strings there. If you pull your elbow into your body, it's going to automatically line your finger up with your frets. It's going to put you in a good position to make those bars. Remember all these tips. Put your bar on, strum it, see if it sounds clean. If not, readjust it. Go through all the tips I've given you. And you're also going to want to experiment with how much pressure is necessary to make your bar sound clean. You don't want to kill yourself and overexert yourselves by putting too much pressure on. That can make the strings go sharp too. So you want to experiment with how much pressure is enough and how much is too much. So a little more clean. I don't need to put any more than that. So let's work on strengthening your bar now that you have some technique and some tips down. The best way to do this is just work on it by itself. And by that, I mean just make a bar across the 1st fret and then move it up 1 fret. Keep all the tips I gave you in mind and make little micro adjustments with your bar if it's not sounding clean. Next fret up. And this will take a while to develop. And you know, if you'll notice, I did that and my middle finger came back to help the bar. And if your index finger is too weak to do this right now, do that. Use your middle finger there to kind of help it as a stepping stone to making clean bars. Eventually you'll want to get it to where it's clean just by itself. And you know, you're going to want to work on this for several weeks to develop your index finger strength. It may take some time for you to build up the strength and dexterity in your index finger, but that's completely normal. Don't worry about that. Consistent practice will really pay off here. So once you have your bar strength and dexterity down, the next step to learning your first bar chord is to learn how to make an open E major shape with your second, third, and fourth fingers instead of your first, second, and third fingers. And if you don't know your open E shape, let me just show it to you real quick. This is an open E. You can learn it later here in the Rhythm Guitar Quick Start series if you like, but the idea is to make that chord with your second, third, and fourth fingers instead of your first, second, and third fingers. So you're gonna wanna put your second finger on the first fret of the G string. Your pinky is gonna come and grab the second fret of the D string, and your third finger is gonna grab the second fret of the A string. It's a little awkward at first, it may be a little awkward at first, but you have to get that down to where you can go right to it. That's your next step. And all 6 strings, you can strum them. Once you can do that, the next little stepping stone for learning this bar chord shape is to just get that chord on there and then come down on the nut of the guitar with your index finger. That's the shape that you're gonna wanna be learning. Now, once you're familiar and comfortable with this, you can try to make the actual full E-shaped bar chord. And to do that, let's go up here to the 3rd fret and put our bar across all 6 strings. And what you have to do once you're there is put your E shape in place to complete the shape. That's all 6 strings. Now, do you see how we just use our bar as kind of a movable nut of the guitar? We had the shape, we just moved it up and then put our bar down and kind of replace the nut to make this bar chord shape. Now, you can work on getting this shape under your fingers in 2 ways. And this is kind of what people naturally do, but it's kind of good to cross-train like this. You can put the bar on first and then put the rest of the shape on. Or you can put the shape on first and then put the bar down. And I think it's good to practice both initially, just so you can kind of get your fingers and your brain around the shape. But eventually you're gonna wanna get it to where you can go just right to the shape all at once. Now, just like with your power chords, how the lowest root note or the lowest note you're playing with your index finger gave that power chord its specific name, the same thing applies here for this bar chord shape. It's gonna get its specific name from the lowest root note on the 6th string that you're playing with your index finger. In this case, the lowest note on the 6th string is a G note right there on the 3rd fret, so this is gonna be a G major bar chord. The coolest thing about bar chords is they're movable just like your power chords. So if you look at the note names on the low 6th string, you can move this bar chord shape all around to play any bar chords you want. So for example, if you had your G bar chord right here, if you move that up to where your bar was on the 5th fret, you can look at the note on the 5th fret of the low E string to see what bar chord you're playing, what major bar chord in this case you're playing. That's an A note, so if your bar is there and you put the rest of your shape on, you'll be playing an A bar chord. So experiment with this shape, move it all around. Because playing it down here feels quite a bit different than playing it up here. You have to scrunch your fingers up a little bit more. So move it around and get as comfortable as you can with it. Thanks for watching this lesson. I know we covered a lot of information, but that's okay. You can come back and watch it again if you need to. Work on building up the strength in your bar and getting this shape down and moving it all around the fretboard. If you have any questions about this lesson, you can leave them here in the comments or email me, Nate@guitarsystem.com. See ya.